and welcome to the channel. This is Meanpooh, and what I have today is another tutorial. I think some of you will find it helpful as I get asked often about how to install a drive in one. And what exactly am I talking about? Well, it's the M.2 slot on the inside of the Acer Nitro 5, and it's found on many newer motherboards and laptops. I have not made one as my setup is pretty good, having my boot drive being on the SSD. So I'm going to walk you through how I upgraded my machine using a larger capacity drive. I'm good with computers and I'm very familiar with components, but I was lacking in the subject and had to acquire some knowledge. I proceeded first to do some research on the M.2 slot to make sure I know what I'm doing. I remember seeing the slot on my other motherboards, but never have taken advantage, mostly because I never had a drive to put in the slot. Now let's get some of the terminology down. M.2 is a specification for internally mounted computer expansion cards and associated connectors. It replaces the M.SATA standard, which uses the PCI Express mini card physical card layout and connectors. It is designed for manufacturers to replace a variety of specific devices in a small space and requires very little power. Some Bluetooth and Wi-Fi cards are sold in the M.2 form factor. M.2 SSDs typically come in 3 dimensions, which may be deduced from the card name: 2242, 2260, and 2280. 22 represents the width in millimeters, while the next 2 digits represent the length. It's also in millimeters. The longer the drive, the more NAND flash chips can be mounted, which will add more capacity. M.2 SATA looks just like the NVMe, but uses the SATA protocol and has 2 notches cut out of the bottom connector. Expect speeds up to around 600 megabytes per second. Having a non-volatile memory express, or NVMe for short, connection allows a solid-state drive to have its data read straight from a PCI Express slot right on the motherboard. A NVMe drive will draw power and data through the motherboard at a faster rate than SATA. This is accomplished by queuing more data at once due to having access to more PCI Express lane. You can get speeds as high as 3,500 megabytes per second and can be identified by 1 notch cut out of the bottom left or top right, depending how you are looking at it. Moving on, I then headed to Acer to ask them some questions. I queued up an online chat, and this is what he had to say. It could be a girl, but I'm just going by the name. It looks like a he. There would have been more questions, but I was trying to get an answer quick. By the way, someone already answered the question on their own forums, as seen here. I'm surprised that the rep didn't mention it. Links in the description. I'm still not convinced after leaving the rep and my quick chat, so I'm going to try it anyway. I started my search for a decent drive, and since I have mostly Samsungs in my other builds, it was only natural to get another. I finally settled on the Samsung 970 EVO, which is a NVMe drive. Now it's time to gather the things that I'm going to need. This only consisted of the USB recovery drive that I made earlier. If you do not have one, grab a USB drive with at least 16 gigabytes of storage and head over to your Acer Care Center program. Once open, click the tab that says Recovery Management. Now click the Backup tab. You'll be presented with 2 options: Create Factory Default Backup and the option to back up the drivers. Click Create Factory Default Backup by clicking Get Started on the right. Follow the prompts and put a check in Backup System File to the recovery drive and click Next. When prompted, insert your drive. As you can see, I have already created one and it's listed in the Available Drive section. When finished, you will go back to the Acer Care Center. Now select the option to back up the wireless and LAN drivers. It will then ask you where you want to save them. I have my drivers saved to my storage drive. You can also find all the drivers on the Acer site. Software, BIOS updates, and documents are there as well. Here is the drive I ordered from Amazon. This is the front, back, and inside packaging. The drive comes in a nice white box with no room for movement. There is also warranty information on the inside box of 2 parts. this is everything laid out. I was going to make a disassembly video, but I figure I can link others to the ones I have already made. The link will also be in the description. Here is a close-up of the M.2 slot with the factory drive installed. Be careful removing the screw because you have to add some pressure to get it loose. Notice how the board looks like it's flexing. Since the board is suspended a little in the case, be careful as you could possibly crack it. This is the front side of the drives. And here's the notch. I'm quite surprised that the Nitro 5 came with an NVMe SSD. I was happy, very happy at that point. I was expecting the latter, which was the M.2 2280 form factor equipped with the SATA 3 interface, the slower version of the two. That would explain why the Acer Nitro 5 with the SSD costs a little bit more. Installing was just as easy as removing. Push it in at the shown angle and screw it down. Make sure to match up the notch. It shouldn't be hard as it will go in only one way. Here is another close-up of the new drive installed. Now with the machine assembled, it's time to boot up. If you get this screen, it means exactly what it says. Log into your BIOS and check to see if it is listed. Next, head over to the Advanced tab and enter into the SATA configuration and make sure both ports are enabled. Also, before we exit, take note that on the main tab, make sure that the F12 Boot Menu is enabled. Your boot tab will look like this before installation. After Windows is installed, it will look like this. At this point, if your flash drive is not inserted, you should do so. Exit out of the BIOS. Again, be sure the USB flash drive is inserted and let Windows install. Follow the prompts and continue. Finally, we are in Windows and you can see that it's listed here. Now let's backtrack a bit. While I was waiting for the drive to arrive, I was looking for software for SSDs and hard drives. I came up on one called CrystalDiskInfo. Links in the description. And it gives a ton of information about your drives. There's so much here, I don't even know half of what they do, but it's all related to the drives and it's worth checking out. It gives information on health status, firmware, has your serial number, transfer mode, which is really helpful, power on counts, power on hours, the type of interface, and more. I did open up the health status option and none of the fields were populated. There were some numbers at the bottom, but they really didn't make sense to me. Not sure if it was a bug or what. Another program I found was made for the Intel NVMe drive that was in the Acer Nitro 5 that I own. And that one is called Intel Solid State Drive Toolbox. And I'll have a link in the description where you can get it. This one is a whole lot better. It's specifically for the brand of your drive. You can see the estimated time of life that is left. There's the health of your drive, details on how well your drive is behaving. You can even run diagnostic both quick and full. There's a secure erase. I guess you can use that if you're going to sell your machine. And there's a notification for firmware updates. I looked into this a while ago, and some people were having problems with the newest firmware update. Not sure if it ever got resolved. Anyway, there's a system tuner which recommends things you could do to make your system possibly faster. And lastly, system info, which is self-explanatory. Okay, now let's fast forward. Here is some software that should be installed. It's pretty much like installing your motherboard drivers that a lot of people and some builders forget to do. First is the NVMe driver. Links in the description. Most of the time Windows has these drivers within itself. Probably some of the reasons why it's so bloated. But you really should install the manufacturer driver, as they may have some added benefits that make the drive more efficient. Next is the Samsung Magician software for consumer, and the link is also in the description. This does the same thing as the Intel software, and it lets you run a performance benchmark. You can optimize your drive and others if they are supported. There's another option in there that I've heard about but never experienced or used the feature. It's called over provisioning. When a solid state drive arrives from the factory, you might be surprised to see that the actual storage space is less than the total capacity. The part that you cannot see, access, nor use is called over provisioned space, which is reserved for performing various memory management functions. Some users see over provisioning as a waste of storage capacity, but by guaranteeing permanent free space that is inaccessible to the user, the drive controller can manage all data traffic and NAND maintenance tasks in the background more efficiently. This space makes sure that the drive is not completely filled up with data, so other controller tasks can run smoothly. SSDs typically ship with factory set 7 to 12% over provision, and as you can see, Magician wants me to set mine at 10%. Now here's a boot test with the new drive. It's a tad over 7 seconds. I got 7.35 seconds from when the power button was pushed. I know this video is getting long, but I have some benchmarks that I want to show you of the Samsung and the Intel SSD. And for the test I used CrystalDiskMark, and there's a link in the description for that. Also, it's one of the most used disk benchmarking softwares out there. It shows results from several speed measurements. The results are from read and write speeds for sequential, large contiguous files, medium files, and small files. Additionally, it reports read and write speeds for 4 kilobyte files, while the drive is under load with 32 simultaneous requests. It's really simple and easy to use. So now here are the numbers. This is insane, but mind you that the top drive is the Firecuda, the middle is the Intel NVMe, and the bottom is the Samsung 970 EVO NVMe. Now, these numbers on the first two can be a little skewed, as the more an SSD fills up, it can become slower. But regardless of that, the Samsung is killing it at this point. I'll redo the test if I can find somewhere to put all the extra files that I have laying around. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video. It's been a long one, and I worked on it all weekend. If it helped you, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Meanpooh out.